Welcome to the Well Workplaces podcast, where we have authentic conversations with health and wellbeing leaders that are on a mission to inspire healthy change in the workplace. I'm your host, Tom Bosner, and today's episode is proudly brought to you by Pinnacle Health Group, Australia's leading corporate wellbeing provider, who are on a mission to deliver 5 million health experiences globally. Now, to stay in touch with the latest events and content related to Well Workplaces, you can click subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram by simply typing in Well Workplaces. Now, today I'm joined by special guest, Josh Lambert. Now, a little bit about Josh before we introduce him formally. Josh is a wellbeing entrepreneur, physiotherapist, speaker, and co-owner of Pinnacle Health Group with me, actually. Now, Josh is a workplace wellbeing leader and advocate, and along with hosting regular masterclasses and events and being featured on wellbeing panels, Josh has been published for wellbeing expert articles on publications such as Men's Fitness Magazine and the Australian Financial Review. Now, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Excited to be here, mate.
Well, Joshy, we are speaking about health checks today, and I think probably just a really good place to start here is to get your expertise in on this topic. The world's changed a lot in the last couple of years. A lot of men especially haven't, I guess, stayed on top of their health, and health checks is one of those avenues for keeping yourself in check. I'm wondering, from your perspective, why do you think health checks are so important in today's world, but also in the workplace setting?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. And I guess really, if you take a step back and look at what a health check is to start with, it's really assessing health and wellbeing. So I suppose to cut to the chase, and I don't know who I can credit with this quote. I think it's an old one, but the saying, what you can measure, you can manage. I might just attribute that quote to you, mate, because I know you're pretty good at saying that one. But basically, if you're not measuring anything, including health and wellbeing, it's pretty hard to manage it and make decisions about it. So if we think about that in the health and wellbeing sense, but also in the workplace health and wellbeing sense, if we're not taking some data or measuring something to do with health and wellbeing of our people, it's very hard to then provide smart and efficient intervention, I suppose, to improve wellbeing. So that's pretty much to cut to the real nuts and bolts of what a health check is. But yeah, you're spot on. There's been lots of, even more so in this sort of post-COVID or, during COVID world that we're in at the moment, there's been lots and lots of talk of health checks and health assessment of any form. I guess there's been this, I shouldn't say perfect storm, because that implies that it's a good thing, but there's been this real melting pot of, you've had high profile deaths of Australian sporting celebrities and other well-known people in Australia. There's been the 2 years of COVID. So the usual population that would go out and get their health checks or their 6 monthly or 12 monthly checkups, they haven't been doing that. And there's been a huge focus on workplace wellbeing generally. So you add those different factors together, and for that reason, I guess us at Pinnacle Health Group as health check service providers have been extremely busy, but also, not even working population, just, all of us are looking to stay on top of measuring our health, because it's been a really challenging time, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right about the high profile celebrities. It feels like there was a period there where there was at least someone famous passing away due to a heart attack or heart related issues. So yeah, that kind of brought it up to attention again for a lot of people, being that a lot of those high profile people were kind of young as well. So yeah, that was kind of interesting how that happened all in one burst. Josh, I'm wondering, with health checks, sometimes I guess there's, it's kind of that idea of who's really responsible for looking after their health and health checks, and from a workplace perspective, it's kind of like, why? I guess the question is, why do workplaces provide health checks, and why has that been a thing? Because I guess you could argue that it's really just up to the individual to look after their own health, right?
Yeah, well, that's the age-old argument, I guess, Tom. And it is funny you say that. There's really two main reasons that you do workplace health checks that we summarise for our clients. And the first and hopefully the most important benefit is to the employee themselves. So the workplace or the employer provides the health checks. The first benefit of doing those is that the employee or the end user of that health check gets to know their health information there, so they can then screen for chronic disease risks, screen for markers for obesity, poor nutrition, those sorts of things that are crucial with health checks. That's the first real benefit, and hopefully the most important reason that workplaces do this. The second one, of course, is for the workplace themselves or for the employers, and that basically what that means is that if they're providing or really encouraging their staff to engage in these health checks, they get that health data or get that information. Now, that sounds scary. What I don't mean, it's all de-identified information. So, when workplaces run health checks, the employer won't get information that says Josh has high blood pressure or Josh is, not eating enough vegetables, but it will say of the 100 employees or the 1,000 employees that underwent health checks, the average blood pressure was this, or your staff were in the high risk category for this particular chronic disease. So it's really twofold, the benefits of workplaces, and I guess that really leads to why they've been done in the first place. These have been happening for decades. Some high level data for those people listening of where health checks really fit into corporate health or fit into workplace health. 30 basically of all the different wellbeing initiatives, health and wellbeing initiatives that you could run at a workplace, health checks are 38% of those. So they're a big section of the pie of what workplaces have up to this point in time offered. I think they're beaten only by health and fitness programs, which can be as simple as like discounted gym membership. So they are pretty much, in terms of the service, the highest frequency or the highest prevalence of a service provided to employees. So yeah, that's sort of, I guess, a bit of context around why they're delivered. In terms of the benefits, though, yeah, really, it's twofold. It's for the employees, but the employers get a lot of really helpful information.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess going back to what you can measure, you can manage. Is that that's what you quoted? And exactly. You quoted, that was my quote that you quoted. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? I guess to get data on either end for the individual. Maybe that's the prod they need to become more aware of their current health conditions, perhaps to then make some changes.
Sorry, mate. I was just going to say, yeah, it is. It's crucial because you've got 33% of working Australians, just to give you some more information on that, have at least one chronic disease risk factor. So if you think of that, a third of the working population have at least one chronic disease risk factor. So if you're a workplace and you're not getting information on that, one, you're not working out, where are the risks in my population? And there's probably a third of my staff that have some risks. But to your point there, and sorry I cut in, but where you then get to is, rather than when it gets to designing a wellbeing program or starting to think about the intervention side of your wellbeing program, if you don't have that measurement to start with, you might be pumping budget or pumping attention and resources into parts of health and wellbeing that aren't tailored to your organisation. Or, for example, if the employees tested really poorly for nutrition and diet on the health checks, and you don't have anything in your wellbeing program to do with health and diet and nutrition, you're kind of missing the mark there. So hopefully that's probably getting a bit more specific there, but it's important to point that out.
Yeah. No, that's good. Love it. We've talked about health checks a little bit, more broadly. I guess there's different styles of health checks, obviously. What would be like a typical standard health check, and what would it include for that individual?
Yeah, the most popular, I'll start with the most popular really at workplaces, or the most prevalent, and that would be, we call it our essential health check, but it could be called anything from a heart health check or a cardiovascular check or just simply a health check. The most common one is a 15-minute check. We've all probably had these when we've been to our GP before, or you may have had a workplace health check before. It's the classic 15-minute check. You get the pinprick blood check, so you get the blood droplet. That measures your cholesterol, your HDL to LDL cholesterol as well. It also measures your blood glucose. You get your blood pressure done, your resting heart rate. waist circumference, hip to waist ratio, which is a marker of obesity and risk factors for diabetes and so on. There's screening questions to do with nutrition and diet. There's screening questions to do with exercise, smoking, alcohol intake, and so on. So it really is this general health check, but it hones in quite a bit onto the cardiovascular disease risk factors, given that they are the highest risk in Australia and in the Western world as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And what's the fun fact that you're always dropping to me about the veggies and how many vegetables and fruit you need to eat?
Yeah.
Per day?
Well, I'm not sure if listeners are across this, but basically we should be eating 5 servings of vegetables per day. That's the Australian dietary guidelines for vegetables per day. And it's way less than half. I don't, off the top of my head, I've probably quoted this to you before, but it's way less than half. So way less than 50% of the population that actually consume 5 servings of vegetables or consume the minimum dietary guidelines. So as a question on our health check, on the health data that workplaces get back, they'll often get back, blood pressure was normal across the 100 employees that you had, or, tested really well for these categories. But when it gets to nutritional intake, vegetables, we're falling massively behind. So, I get quite evangelical about that with you, don't I? When we're eating our coleslaw wraps at work, and just trying to cram in servings of vegetables to sneak in to get that 5 a day.
Absolutely. Have you seen the price of lettuce at the moment? It's ridiculous. I reckon that might be a barrier for some people.
Yeah, I saw KFC have gone to cabbage instead of lettuce. Actually, so that's a big move. Awesome. We shouldn't be talking about a KFC on a wellbeing podcast, should we?
Yeah. What is that? Hey, with developing, I guess when companies get that pool of data and they kind of essentially have a feel for the health profile of their population, there's probably no doubt with all that data, there's probably some regular things that come up. You mentioned the vegetable intake or lack of intake. Are there any other interesting data points that keep coming up in different workplace populations with our clients or with some of the research you've done?
Yeah, there are. In terms of the questionnaire questions, there's questions on lifestyle in general. So that is exercise frequency and duration. There's questions on, I mentioned before, sort of alcohol intake and so on. So they're really quite highly variable. You can imagine, the range of workplaces we work with, over 200, depending on the nature of the beast, whether it's an office-based organisation, whether there's some staff that are working remotely or might be out on gas mines and those sorts of things. Obviously, it is highly variable, but in terms of, I guess, what you're leaning to there, what are the sort of data points that we're getting? Well, it's really important that the data points are across a multitude of different health factors. So, what I'm really getting at here is that we do also ask questions relating to mental wellbeing. So there's the DAS21 and the K10, which are actually mental health components of some of the health checks that we provide. So I know I haven't answered your question yet, but I'm just sort of taking a step back and going, that's how broad the data points can be. But, to come back to your question, well, what are some, I guess, trends that we're seeing, outside of maybe the nutritional ones? Well, sleep is huge. So, are you getting more than 7 hours of recommended sleep per night? Massive amounts aren't. I don't have the data on the top of my head of that, but certainly a lot of us aren't sleeping, 7 hours or more a night. So that if you're listening to this, the recommended minimum is 7 hours a night. If you think you're one of those people that doesn't need 7 hours, you're probably kidding yourself a little bit. But certainly it is that's quite common. Other ones that are common, as I said, Tom, it is highly variable. It does depend on the workplace, but we see outside of the nutrition sort of being in the high risk category there. Waist circumference, hip to waist ratio, let's face it, we've had 2 years where we're not moving as much. A lot of the corporate world, working from home. It's colder now as well. We've been through lockdowns. Generally, we've put on weight, and generally we've moved less as a society. So we're seeing some trends that are kind of not great trends, by the way, but seeing some trends in that direction. So, So hopefully that kind of answers your
question. Yeah, no, it does. And one of the things I read was the average weight gain over the pandemic and it was for men, it was around that 5.5 kgs across over the 2 years. So just a little bit of extra put on the body each year and compounding over that time. So what we're also seeing, I guess, in our business and through the clinics and stuff is just those types of people going, gee, I've lost my way a little bit with living a balanced lifestyle with eating. Sleep comes up a lot, as you say, and obviously exercise has been, for some people, they've gotten into better shape, and for a lot, it's been the complete opposite way. So yeah, it's been kind of an interesting recipe for disaster, really, the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's been, I think you asked sort of what other health checks are there, and you made me think of it as you were speaking there, but certainly the classic essential health check, the cardiovascular health check is super popular. Probably worth noting as well that skin cancer checks would be the second highest, most popular health check that we run. And again, if you think about it, yes, there's been lockdowns, and yes, it's been a pretty weird 2 years, but it's also been another type of health check that we've avoided as society, and we're still exposed to the sun, particularly here in Australia and across New Zealand as well. We've got some of the highest exposures to UV. So, skin cancer checks are huge in the workplace. They're a close second. And worth noting as well that from our, speaking to those data points that you asked about, across all of the skin cancer checks that we run at workplaces, and this is where, for those that haven't experienced this before, a skin cancer check is where a dermatoscopist comes out to the workplace. That's a fancy name for effectively a skin cancer practitioner. Comes out to the workplace, assesses the skin and looks at all the sunspots on the body with a dermatoscope. Basically, out of all the workplace programs we run, out of all the different employees, 71% of those employees that have a workplace skin cancer check done, it's their first ever skin cancer check they've had done. So I'll say that again. So basically 71% of employees that get a skin cancer check done through their work, it's the first ever skin check they get done. So for obvious reasons, it's a hugely powerful initiative because these people aren't getting skin checks done anyway, or they're not voluntarily going out and accessing that as much as they should be. So even if it's that first line of defense and it's just exposing employees to it, it's hugely powerful. And you can imagine it's kind of an emotive subject when it gets to the workplace, because if you're saving lives by detecting melanomas, it's been pretty powerful. So yeah, I thought I'd mention that one as well in the two most popular types of health check there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good one. Now, as we look ahead to the future, and I always like to talk, in 5 years or 10 years ahead, with health assessments for workplaces, what do you think is going to change in terms of assessments? Are we going to, do you think organisations are going to be doing more of this, or aiming to assess different aspects of wellbeing in the next 5 years, given the current environment of hybrid working and obviously remote working?
Yeah, short answer, yes, Tom. I think just to give that some context, you look at it, and if you're, this melting pot we spoke before around COVID, awareness of employee wellbeing, the benefit of employee wellbeing and seeing productivity, but also this hybrid remote working and flexibility, employee wellbeing, employee health is going to be top of the agenda moving forward. So in that context, wellbeing programs, intervention for employees is only going to grow. So with that, if we're not measuring, to come back to the quote from right at the start of the podcast, if we're not measuring, it's very hard to manage. Or if we're not measuring and we are increasing resources into wellbeing, we're probably just taking a bit of a punt. We're just a bit of a scattergun approach, like let's do a sprinkle of nutrition stuff, a little bit of sleep health, we'll sort out mental wellbeing, financial wellbeing, and it's probably not tailored to that organisation. So the first answer to your question there would be that yes, hopefully, if workplaces are doing it correctly, they're going to be increasing the measurement component of that before they just start to throw different wellbeing initiatives willy-nilly. Looking at how that gets done, to come back to what I was saying there about the remote working and hybrid working, probably there's increasing benefits or advancements in technology that are allowing health checks to get done in a range of different places. So I suppose the two health checks I've spoken about the most today, the essential health check or the heart health check and the skin cancer check, they are traditionally done in person, in a workplace or in an office. Captive audience can get that done, and it's fairly easy to happen. But if we fast track and we look at the world right now, if large majorities of populations might be working from home that day or remote working or hybrid, the challenges of getting everyone into the workplace to have that physical check done in person can be challenging. So there's new technology that's improving all the time with remote health checks. So there's actually some technology that exists at the moment to conduct those similar glucose and cholesterol tests from the home, and they can be sent off to pathology labs and conducted remotely. Even our skin cancer checks that would, are often done, the gold standard is being done in person. There's technology that can attach to smartphones these days that can actually go through effectively the same assessment but remotely. So the patient or the patient's partner or family member takes the photography of those spots, and it's then assessed remotely. And there's new technology now as well that look at different markers in the blood for diabetes and so on, which is HB1AC, I believe is the correct term. So basically, I guess you add all those components together, what we're really likely to see is not just kind of faster access to these and more remote access, but we're going to look at sort of measuring different things as well. So, things like measuring our DNA and genetic testing as well, and looking at what risk factors do we have moving forward to different types of disease. It's not crazy to think that workplace health checks would be a lot more, dare I say, invasive, but uncover a lot more information moving forward. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the implications for that could be also at that pre-employment stage where you're getting a sense of people's, if it is something like genetic testing, and you're kind of getting a really good insight into, those risk factors before they actually start the employment with you. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thought and an interesting idea to think about, 5 or 10 years ahead. Josh, mate, that was great. Thanks so much for your time today, and chat soon.
Thanks, Tom.